As far as we've got so far, we've seen that we can use our bind server as a caching only server, and that appears to be the default mode. But we can also set it up as a forwarding server where we can put the address of other DNS servers where we send requests straight through. So we don't do the lookup ourselves, we just ask another server to carry out the lookup for us. We can also be a master. With this, we're looking after a zone, and we're then the master server for the zone. So we really have the read-write copy of the zone file, as opposed to a slave server, which is really going to have the read-only copy of a zone file. Very often, we won't allow clients to query the master server. All of the queries will happen on the slave server, and the slave server will then just synchronize changes through from the master. A lot just depends though on the size of our DNS infrastructure and how many servers we implement. As well as these modes, we need to consider the listen on parameter to specify which interfaces or IP addresses we're going to be listening on. Very often the default is only the local host. And also we need to look at the allow query line. Again, very often allow query is allowed from the local system but not from anywhere else. So even though we've appeared to have our system up and running, without further investigation we need to look at the distribution and the configuration they supply to see what the defaults are. We certainly don't necessarily want to allow query to any device, but certainly from our own network, we probably would want to allow queries to be instigated on our server. So let's move now onto our CentOS host so we can look at the configuration file and where we configure these modes and options such as listen on. We can see by looking at my working directory that I'm in the etc directory, and I'm going to go straight ahead and edit the named.conf. On the CentOS host, pretty much we do use this file. There are some inclusions, but rather than have just an empty name.conf that only has inclusions, in here we have actually got our working configuration. So we can see that we define then, first of all, our global options. When we see the listen on, we've got the listen on port 53, and underneath that we've got listen on v6. So it's listening then on the local host, and only the local host, but both on IP version 6 and IP version 4. Let's just move down through to this, and I'm going to add in, and we can see within the configuration here that the end of each line is terminated by a semicolon, and within each multi-valued option, such as the listen on, we terminate each option with a semicolon. So we want to make sure that we're listening both on the local host and also listening on the external address, which on this system is going to be 10.0.2.15. And of course, remember I've just said that we must terminate each of these options with the semicolon. Now, of course, on your system, you might be using a different IP address. As we carry on down, we can then go through and look at the allow query. And in here, we can see that it's allowing query from the local host, but I want to allow it from the local network as well. So I'm going to specify in here 10.0.2/24, so 24-bit network that we're using, again with a semicolon. So I'm allowing queries as long as it comes from the local host or anyone on the 10.0.2 network. As we carry on down, we can see it's got some notes in here regarding the authoritative and recursive serving. And the recursive service is really what we have with a caching only server, and recursion is turned on. So with this then we've enabled our caching only server. We don't host any zones as such other than the standard default zones. If we carry on down, we can go through and see how those zones are defined. So we have our root zone servers, And that's pretty much all that we have included in our configuration. If I save this configuration, so I'm jumping out and saving the configuration, with that saved, then I can go through and run our RNDC and then reload. If I go back and run the netstat command, we should be able to now see from the output of the netstat command that I'm listening not only on the local host, but also on the 10 address range. If I go back and look at my dig command now, I should be able to run this not only against the local host, but we should be able to run it against 10.0.2.15. So we're now coming in on the interface that we have just enabled, and we can see then again we're getting the response coming back. So let's clear this out. So we've been able to go through and look at configuring our DNS server. We've pretty much left it as a caching only server, but we've included options to make sure that we're listening on our external interface and to allow queries from our locally connected network. To restart the service, we use the RNDC and the reload option. Let's just make sure that we tidy up this section now by jumping back to the slides to tidy up this module.